The good old renting versus buying. A controversial topic, especially for millennials, like the younger millennials and Gen Zs. Now, this video isn't meant to push you in either directions. You can kind of do whatever you want, but I'm just going to share my experience in purchasing a home in the outer region of Brisbane up here in Queensland. And walk you through some of my own thought processes. We'll go through some government stats and see, what the trends are and what it's actually like in Australia, which I think might shine some light on why the Australian dream is to own your own home. And what I hope this video does is spark some conversations in the comment section down below. Give me your thoughts. Whilst you're already on the video, obviously, leave me a like button down below there as well. That would be greatly appreciated. Anyways, guys and girls, without further ado, let's get straight into the video and talk about some money and stats. Now, of course, when you're talking about property, you have to address the monetary cost, because without the money, you don't even have the opportunity to make these kind of decisions, to even say no to buying a home, because if you didn't have the money, then of course your only option is to not have a home. But when we talk about the debate of buying versus renting, you're either going to be in one of two camps. You could be kind of in the middle, but most people fall within one of the two. You're either in the renting camp and going, nah, screw that, I'm going to keep renting, I don't have to pay for all these extra overheads like insurances, rates, water access, and also I get to be more flexible to move to different places and I can invest the difference. Now, if you're in the homeowners camp, you're going, okay, I've rented a few times, I don't really like the situation, I don't like how it all works, I'd rather pay the rent money, the dead money that I was paying to my rent, into my home equity. And especially when you can have somebody else rent out one or two of the rooms, the equity and the debt starts being chipped out away very, very quickly. But I think all of this is quite relative. I would say that here in Brisbane, I think most people would want to own their own place, and it's much more affordable than, let's say, Sydney or Melbourne, where maybe your rent is here and then the cost to buy a home and to pay the interest on that is here. Whereas in Brisbane, I would say that gap is a lot closer depending on which suburb you buy in. But before I get into my own personal thoughts and numbers, I want to look at some of the government stats here. Now, looking at the stats from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, we can see that according to the census in 2016, 67% of households were homeowners, with pretty much about a 50-50 split between those who had a mortgage still on their property and those who didn't have a mortgage on their properties. Now, that's very interesting because I imagine a lot of those who don't have a mortgage on their property probably bought their homes in, say, the 70s, the 80s, or the 90s. Now, in the census, what they also take note of is the home ownership of those between 30 and 34 years old, which has gone down over the decades, but not drastically so, especially when you're taking into consideration the population increase and the increase in home prices. Now, given this census used 1970 as a reference point, I actually wanted to know what the interest rate was at the time, because that'll also dictate whether people are buying or not buying, because the interest rates are meant to act as an incentive for people to purchase properties. And what's interesting was that during the 70s, it was actually quite low. It was about 5%. Now, for me, I was thinking it was going to be maybe in the double digits, which we can see it climb up to later on. But in the 70s, it was in the single digits, and the average annual salary was about $6,000. And this is why you probably see a lot of Australians who are mortgage free, and I definitely know the benefits of being that, as my parents are pretty close to being mortgage free, and well, that cash flow that comes in that we would have paid in interest definitely went to other more fun and enjoyable things in my childhood. Now, with our situation living in Brisbane, we were paying about $300 to $350 a week in rent. Obviously, we tried to make it as small as possible. And with that, we thought, well, look, why don't we just end up going for a budget of about $450,000 for a pre-owned property, or maybe $500 to $550, that's like stretching it, for a brand new property. If there's one thing about me, I don't really like to take on a lot of debt, although we were able to take on hundreds of dollars more than that given our joint income, but we didn't go that route. Anyways, if you know anything about building during a time where there's a large amount of demand, you end up getting outbid for the smallest amount of land possible. When we were looking around, there were only little squares of about 300 to 400 meters square, and they were going for a price that I would never normally pay for had it not been for the grants. And then slowly these prices start to creep up as people start to come in and take advantage of the grant and start buying and building brand new homes. And obviously the developers at this point have so many jobs that there's no need for them to make any reductions for any new clients that come on board or try to come on board, which, by the way, some of them took like a week or two to reply to some of our emails. So there was a massive backlog of work that he needed to do. Another thing I also didn't like about some of these estates is that going into them, they're all very cookie cutter, especially when you get into the entry level of like your 500,000s or so. They all end up being like white homes that you can see from the front all the way to the back, which I get it, opens up the home and it gives it like a very good flow when you're, entering the place, and it kind of guides you to the living space in the back, which leads into the patio. I get all of that, but once you see that a bunch of the homes on the same street look very identical, there is a very, let's say, lack of character in seeing a lot of these homes. Now, when you do go to like the $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 homes, that's when you start seeing changes in materials, designs, and they just look so much more appealing. And then you start to realize there's no way I'm making these type of repayments. And I know for some of you guys from Sydney and Melbourne might go, oh, that's, relatively inexpensive. But for Brisbane prices, that's just something I'm personally not willing to pay for. I could put my money to so many other things apart from the home that I live in. Maybe sometime in the future, but not right now. So instead of going new with the $500,000 to $550,000 budget, we ended up going with a budget of about $450,000 and got pre-owned, which is, well, the place that we got now. Now, a couple of the renos that we did, just on a very, very basic level, and we learned a couple of things along the way, so that's kind of cool. We painted these from like a salmon pinkish maroon color to white, and also the change in the bench top, which is about $2,000 to $3,000. And what it's done there is really brightened up the kitchen, which I really like, and my partner really likes also. So yeah, great value, which would have otherwise just been thrown into the new home where I would have been, charged a premium for something very, very simple. Now, in regards to cash flow, we were paying about $1,400 a month in terms of rent versus the mortgage repayments now, which is about $1,500. Except in this case, I'm actually building equity in the property by paying it off. And we have an offset account, so we're building a lot more equity a lot faster. Now, I understand there are additional costs. Obviously, I just had to pay some rates. There is rates, water access, your insurances, all that type of stuff. But for the slight premium I'm paying, I'm willing to take that on as long as I get to build equity and feel, secure in a way. And of course, it's all psychological because, well, even if I was renting, I'd still have a roof over my head and still be secure, right? But honestly, I don't think the $3,000 to $5,000 premium every single year that I'm paying as opposed to renting would have made me a fortune in about 20 to 30 years time, to be honest, even if it had compounded over time and, all that type of stuff. I just feel a lot more secure in owning my own place, and especially if you're looking to start a family in the near future. Now, if you're stuck between whether you want to rent or buy, ultimately it comes down to lifestyle and ultimate goals. So what do you want your life to look like, and how does that actually look like in the next couple of years or in the medium long term? And for me, I want to start a family in the short medium term. And so the sense of security is so important for me to have my own place and really nobody else to answer to, except the banks. Now, what I was going to get into before that dog started barking in the background was that you can fall in either one of two camps, and there's no other community or group that I've seen this more prevalent than in the FIRE community, where you've got your Gen Zs and your millennials are opting towards more of the rent vesting, where you rent and then continue to invest into ETFs, index funds, let the market take care of itself, compound that over time, and be financially independent as part of the FIRE movement, and hopefully get the RE part, retire early by the time they're 45 to 50 maybe, depending on their goals and how quick they want to make it. But what I love about this community is that you get people from varying age groups. So you get people in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, who are all looking to learn from each other and all looking to achieve the same thing. And so what's refreshing to see is that their perspective in having kids and having that security with the roof over their head and not having to worry about having to move or anything like that as well. It's very reassuring, and it's very similar to what my parents have experienced when they purchased their property in the early 2000s and had become too close to being mortgage free very, very quickly as the price of the property started to quadruple in price and the income started to increase. That extra income that we wouldn't have normally had went to so many other things that we could use, like family trips, nice lunches and dinners, because we had a big family as well, so there was a lot of mouths to feed. So that was a huge benefit that I saw and that I personally would like to achieve also in the future. Another aspect that made me want to buy a house was also that I hate moving. I don't know about you guys, but I personally hate moving, so I hate renting because there's so much admin that you got to do in terms of calling the electricity companies or contacting them online, the internet, the movers. If you're moving yourself, it's a lot of work. If you don't have a ute, I don't have a ute. Had to hire one out, strap things down, and it's a lot of work. And if you want someone to pay somebody else to do it, that's still $400 or so after tax for somebody to move a couple things. Now, we don't have a lot of things in the house, so really all I'd be paying $400 for them to do is to move the fridge, maybe the bed frame, and then the washing machine. That's it. So those 3 things mainly. So I didn't really think it was worth the money, but I ended up doing. But got some bruises, got some cuts, in moving all of that as well. But it's all part of the fun, right? In moving into your very first home. So yes, guys, overall, although I am paying a premium, I actually prefer it, and it does give me a lot of peace of mind, and I get to have people over, I get to change the place however I want. But yes, that's been my experience. Love to hear what your experience has been, whether you currently own, because my channel does have a wide age group in terms of demographic, so it'd be great to hear everybody's experiences down in the comment section below. But apart from that, guys, hope you guys have a great rest of the week. I'll catch you guys later. Cheers.